the abundance of information available to us is not always good for us. At some point, instead of making us more productive, it shuts us down. This is happening to many security managers who are faced with too many cybersecurity providers and solutions. But instead of choosing the best choice, they choose none and eventually harm their organization. So please join me in welcoming our panel of experts on the subject. Mr. Adam Ely, VP and Deputy Chief Information Security Officer of Walmart, USA. Please. Dr. Shimrit Tzur-David, CTO, Israel Secret Double Octopus Company. Mr. Ken Lowe, Director of Cybersecurity at IMDA, Singapore. Retired Colonel Zohar Rosenberg, Vice President of Cyber Investments, Elron, Israel. Morning, my lady, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Mr. Ely, maybe we'll start with you because you probably represent the largest organization here with the most dramatic challenges when it comes to cybersecurity, as being both a huge client and the one that needs to take care of its own customers' protection. Right. So how do you design a strategy for an organization of that magnitude?
Very carefully.
I'm sure. How do you choose? Do you pick and choose those tailor-made solutions, or you look for a one-stop shop?
So I've run security organizations at a number of companies, and prior to Walmart, I founded a mobile security software company that was acquired. So I have experience both on the vendor side and the enterprise side. So when I look at a strategy of how we're going to build our vendor relationships, I really start to think about partnership first. Because at Walmart size, we have 2.3 million employees across 27 countries, and we have hundreds of millions of consumers that I have to protect every day. I am charged as a corporate officer with the goal of making Walmart the most trusted retailer, period. As you can imagine, that's a little stressful because a breach, a security problem, and we lose that trust. So when I think about this, I start from that problem statement and I say, I need the best solutions and I need the best partners. And a company that does many things is great at nothing. So when I start to look at challenging problems, I look for the best in breed that's out there. What solution can I get to bring in to do the best job? Now, that comes with overhead, that comes with more vendors to manage, more contracts, more renewals. But like anything great, there's always some sort of overhead. There's always some sort of management.
How far are you going? I mean, there will always be this company that would show up at your doorstep, will demonstrate how it penetrates to you, and will ask you to buy their product. How far can you go, understanding that there's no complete, holistic, hermetic solution?
So I never stop. The key for us is find the creative solutions. If we can't onboard a new partner, a new vendor, because we already have a product in that space, or because it simply just doesn't support us because of our size and scale, and frankly, that's my biggest problem. We're so large, I break every product. No product can support me. So that's actually my largest problem some days. But we never stop, and we develop innovation internal to the company as well. So we're always pushing forward as much as we can. But we start by addressing the biggest risk, and we look at our customers and our employee data, and we start there because we know the attackers are always getting better, and we're always going to be defending, and we can never be perfect. But it's just a process of never stopping and continuing to innovate with our partners.
So Mr. Lowe, representing a government which is probably not the size of Walmart.
That's right.
But still, do you take a similar approach, or you go for a one-stop shop, avoiding multi-vendors, and take just one, as much as possible, holistic solution?
I'd like to give you an easy answer, but my comment will be, it depends, right? Prior to joining the government, I used to work for security companies. And it depends on which company you work for, right? If you work for a single product, a single vendor company, you say, go with a single vendor approach, right? But if you work for a smaller company, then you say, go multi-vendor, go best of breed, right? So depending on who pays your salary at the end of the day. But as government, we take a different approach, right? It's a more considered approach that we take. We do not discriminate against small vendors or large vendors. We value, of course, most importantly is the technology, the quality, support from the vendor very much. And as we procure solutions, we have to make sure that the vendor has a viable offering that we're going to give it to us, right? But we are living in very complex environments today, right? There are so many new security trends. The cloud has made IT a lot more interesting, right? We're no longer talking about just buying products. We're talking about services. We're talking about, people, consultancies. It's a wide range of things. Things that you would normally not be able to buy in the past, not be able to afford in the past because products used to be a lot more expensive. You could lease them now through cloud computing, right? So it's not about physical things. It's not about things that you can see, you can touch. It's not about software. It's not about hardware. But a lot of things have been virtualized, and that's what makes security so complex today. And I think for government, what we view is that for technologies that are mature, and if there is a level of consistency across different products, we usually have to be transparent with the public. We are transparent in terms of our procurement exercise. So we do usually opt for public tenders to ensure that there is transparency, there's fairness in our procurement process. But there are some technologies which it's emerging, it's in a nascent stage, but it provides a lot of value to us. This is where we allow for a more limited sort of procurement exercise where we narrow down to a few players to ensure that we pick a viable vendor that can offer a viable solution to us.
So when you encounter such an amazing technology
Yes.
coming from some boutique
That's
company, do you recommend them to go through a larger vendor, or you approach them directly?
That's a very good question. So we are agnostic to that in the sense that we have avenues in the Singapore government where we actually even waive a tender. We do waive competition for very promising startups as well as very innovative technology. So that's what we call a green lane channel in the government, where we offer very promising startups to actually sell directly to the government, right? And there's a waiver of competition, there's a waiver of tender for such and such technology. But by and large, if the technology is mature enough, right, they usually go via the public tender approach and the channels that we have, right? But we are cognizant of smaller players who have very innovative solutions, and that's where we do procure them directly. Sometimes we do have outsourcing vendors, like system integrators and things like that. We may direct some of the smaller players to work with our outsourcers at times, but for certain projects, we may at times deal with the vendor directly.
So Mr. David is coming from a company that has one product?
One wide product,
Okay,
maybe.
can you tell us in one line what exactly do you do?
Yeah, actually, we give a solution that eliminates passwords for the organization. No matter what service you want to log in, you can do it without a password.
So when you approach a potential customer, do they require you to go through another provider which they are already used to working with, or they buy directly from you?
Okay, I think that generally as a startup, it might be easier to develop some narrow product and maybe even become some feature in a wide product. But you can have success in the short term. But if you want to have success in the long term and be here for for a long time, you need to be focused on the problem you want to solve. But you must give a very wide solution that solves all aspects and actually all versions of the problem. I think exactly as none of us will buy sushi in an Italian restaurant, and we might find the best sushi in a maybe small Japanese restaurant. So
Sometimes in surprising places.
yeah. So, but I think that the issue is that we all agree that maybe the worst thing for security is complexity. And by adopting a new product, you actually get new capabilities, but you also get new complexity. And there is the radical increase in the complexity, but you don't get such increase in the capabilities. And this contrast is even worse when you get a product that solves some maybe vital but borderline problem. So the thing is to find a solution that will give you maybe a solution to a focused problem, but will give you a very wide solution that can solve all the aspects of that problem.
So, Mr. Rosenberg, you're in touch with many parts of that community, and being a CISO is quite a hard job these days. Do you see some of them becoming despaired, saying, okay, I cannot solve it all, I'm going to protect that much, and that's it, leave me alone, don't bother me with new solutions because I cannot deal with all of that?
Yeah, I do, but I think the differentiation is between smaller organizations and larger enterprises. I think when you're a small organization, when the amount of services that you provide is relatively small, the pace of your innovation in services is slow, then you can allow yourself the approach of, yeah, I'll find that one-stop shop, I'll trust everything there, and I'll take the risk. But if you're a larger enterprise like some of those that we have here, if we take Walmart, then they're in, I won't surprise anyone, they're in competition with Amazon. Amazon is a company that is excellent in doing sprints. They're running fast as hell. And if Walmart...
They're doing a very long sprint so far.
Yeah, but sprint, it's fast. And if an enterprise like Walmart wants to compete, they will have to innovate and bring in new services and new things all the time. Tomorrow they'll want to do home delivery with drones or whatever. So it's new technologies coming in. And in that sense, the idea of having a one-stop shop is naive, romantic, irrelevant for our times. It just cannot happen. If we take another example, there's a company called Snowflake, something with data. I won't go into technical stuff, but they are allowing today new ways to share data that were never before possible, without integration, without APIs, without anything. So no one can tell me that a firewall or a next generation firewall or a web application firewall can handle that. It's a completely new world which requires new concepts of security. You will not find that in that one big stop shop. You will always have to deal with the new best of breed if you want to keep running, if you want to stay behind, be a small business, traditional one, that's fine. But if you want to offer new services, new customer experience, new value, you will have to take best of breed from the market.
So, Mr. Eli, how do you determine how far do you go? I mean, this is an endless race at the end of the day, and you said that you want to be in the forefront, but there are not endless resources to invest in that.
Yeah, so the way that we look at it is that the threat landscape is constantly change. So we have to change as well, and we have to keep investing. Where the end of that road is, I don't see that end yet. The attackers are getting better, governments are attacking each other. I mean, the whole landscape has changed from 10 years ago. I don't see where the road ends, but for us, it's an evolution. So it's not always that we have to add more vendors. It's that we have to really understand what the risk is and just continue to evolve with the landscape as well. Just like regulation in every sector evolves and continues, we never get rid of our companies, never get rid of their lawyers and never get rid of their tax accountants because it's always changing. So to me, it's not really an end, it's just how fast do we need to evolve? And that's really market dynamics in the cybersecurity market or the criminal landscape market. It's market dynamics that define that for us. So it's a long way of saying we just have to keep going. I don't see an end yet.
And how much are your customers concerned about their own security when giving you their data?
You know, I think that's a great question because when I look across the global landscape, if you had asked me that question even 3 to 4 years ago, I would say most consumers, no matter what company or what sector, were very unconcerned. Now we actually see that consumers are asking good questions. With GDPR in Europe, with the new California privacy bill in the US, stuff we're seeing in other parts of Europe, South America as well, we're realizing consumers are actually speaking up for the first time. My team recently ran a sales campaign for Walmart. It's the first time I convinced our merchants and our marketing team that during Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, we wanted to send out an email campaign to consumers. And we wanted to teach our consumers how to be safe, how to live a safe life. That's online, offline, everything. And we linked to some products and things, not so much to generate sales, but just to show people what to look for out there. The response rate and the sales was great from the consumers. This was the first time that we actually had proof point that our consumers really cared, that the consumers of Walmart, our actual consumers, not the generic consumers in the market, not the people going to legislators when there's a breach, actual people every day without a breach saying, I want to do something. And that was, that's kind of when we stood up and said, this is amazing. So now the InfoSec, or the cybersecurity division of Walmart, actually has to think about that consumer even more and how we drive more awareness to the consumer and how we do a better job, because we know that they're watching, which obviously is great for me because it means my job is important, so I'm happy about that.
So what is the role of government regulation in that? Do you let the market dictate how far companies should go into protecting their customers and their own information, or do you still regulate it, at least in your country?
Yeah, good question. We definitely want to regulate, especially things that are mature, things that are new. But some of you have said that, you know, in the areas that are emerging and are innovating, regulation hasn't caught up with those things yet. You know what I mean? So there are things like IoT security, for example, right? There is not a lot of IoT security adoption or IoT security, for example. And this is where regulation may not have kept up yet, but we do generally provide guidelines to ensure that, you know, as long, you know, security principles don't change, right? They don't change all the time. So likewise, if there's any new technology, right, you should abide by some of these security guidelines. But I just want to say that, you know, there are, you know, significant risks in both school of thought, whether it's in multi-vendor or single vendor, right? I think the single vendor solutions, usually the bigger players like to say, you know, try to buy everything from me because it allows better integration, it allows better containment or breach, you know, there's better interoperability between my products. But I do remember, you know, there were cases of vulnerabilities that were found in products, right, which it was a threat that goes across all the products, you know, from a single vendor. So the risk of what we call vulnerability contagion is very high when you deal with a single vendor, right? I shan't name vendors, I don't want to name and shame them, you know what I mean? But you guys know, right? And by the way, there are great companies in Israel, right? Great companies in Israel, and I've heard both sides of the story. And I think it's a continuing debate, it will never end. I think if we can come back here 10 years later, we'll still have this debate, right? But vulnerability contagion is one thing, but there is also arguments against a multi-vendor solution or best of breed, right? Although you may have advantages in terms of innovation, the downside of multi-vendor solution is that we are talking about disparate solutions, solutions that may not necessarily work well together. And sometimes when you have that situation where it's disparate, it's dispersed, and it's distributed, one man's problem is not another man's problem. So I can't, you know, I focus in doing one area of security, but if I can't solve it, you know, I expect other people to do it, right?
Sometimes it seems, Mr. Rosenberg, that there's a yearning for regulation.
Yeah.
Companies smaller than Walmart are yearning for someone to tell them how far do they need to go.
Precisely. And the other thing that I've heard some of my CISO friends say that the advantage of working with multi-vendor or best-of-breed vendors is that they are more hungry as well. They're more eager to do business. And therefore, they are more flexible. They are more ready to customize their solution. And I've seen CISOs deploy you know, new startup solutions because they are more flexible and they are more customizable. And that's where I think both sides, whether it's multi-vendor or single vendor, they have pros and cons, and there's no right or wrong solution. I think, as I said earlier on, with the cloud, with managed security services, it changes everything, right? Because in the past, people used to buy products and they run their own products. They got to be trained on the products. They got to have competencies that are built in-house. But with managed security services, with outsourcing, a lot of it can be offloaded to a vendor, a trusted, reliable vendor who can provide that service, to deal with multi-vendor solutions.
Just a word about the regulation. I think there are areas where it's required, and I think there are some smart things that were included in the GDPR. For example, things that are in the level of constitutional laws, like as an individual, have the right to be forgotten. I have the right to know what organizations are doing with my data. But as regulation tries to go deeper, it's usually an obstacle. Just for an example, today there are still regulations requiring organizations to switch passwords for everyone every 3 months. All research from recent years shows that it is completely useless, but it's under regulation, so we keep doing it. So regulation needs to understand where technology...
The fact that there is stupid regulation doesn't mean that all regulation is stupid.
No, I said there are some parts that are smart, but if you try to be too specific with the regulation, it will fail us because the technology is running much faster than regulation can. So if regulation tries to dictate specific measures, it will be an obstacle. It will be the wrong measures in 3 years from now. And organization will keep doing it, be open to exploits and breaches because of that.
Regulation will never be able to keep up with the pace of advancement of technology.
Not in the details, not in the technical details, not in the specific measures. It has to be on a principle line.
So look, go ahead.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
So one thing I'd like to add about regulation is regulation has an interesting downside effect as well, that when a regulation is passed, in many countries and some jurisdictions are different, that becomes the reasonable standard. And then that becomes the minimum bar that somebody does. There's a regulation that I'm reviewing right now in one of the countries that we operate, and I'm very unhappy with it, not because I don't think that it needs to be there, not that I don't want to do it, because it's a needed thing. It's a protecting consumer data type law. But as a consumer, it scares me because that becomes the minimum bar, the reasonable standard for that country that companies can operate at. And that if companies meet that regulation and they're still breached, there may be no liability. There's no incentive to do more in the ecosystem and driving that innovation, that evolution.
But for the medium and small companies, they're looking for that kind of guidance that would tell them, you need to invest that much at least. After that, it's up to you, and they need that guidance.
And this is the double-edged sword of it, is the small companies or the companies that are coming to market that they just don't have the expertise. They need that guidance. And there's standards out there. There's the ISOs and the NIST from the US and standards from other governments as well that can really help meet that. And regulation helps force some of those small companies to come to a certain bar, but we also have to kind of be very careful that that's not where everybody stops. And then people say, oh, well, I got breached, but I met the law, so it's okay. So I think there's a lot of consortiums out there that can help kind of define that minimum standard. And I think government and policy is a good thing, and we do need those things as well. But we have to watch out for that downside also.
So a company your size, for example, are you looking only for gigantic customers like huge agencies, government agencies, huge corporations, or you have an appeal to smaller businesses?
Actually, we can, since we solve like this wide problem, we can integrate it into any company in any size. And as a gentleman say here, each CISO wants to be very updated and to adopt new solutions. And the industry still suffers from a massive compromises in security. And this is despite of the fact that all these products are integrated into the solution. So I think one of the main reasons for that is these systems are very complex to operate. And let's take, for example, this Windows Hello. Now there is a big buzz about it. So I think the vendor is quite big of Windows Hello. And they actually solve a very major problem of authentication. You smile to your PC and you're in. It's like, you know, you come in the morning, you log in without a password, very nice. But what if now the CISO now willing to adopt this solution, and now you have a non-Microsoft environment in the organization, and you want your employees to also log into some cloud services and to some legacy services, and Windows Hello cannot solve that problem. So now you need to adopt some other vendor for cloud services, and maybe another vendor for legacy services. Now you have at least 2 or 3 vendors for the same problem. So this is what I'm saying, that maybe you need to choose some vendor that's giving you a solution for a very focused problem, but will give a wide solution. So we can integrate it as a startup and to any size of a company, because we give like a very specific solution, but very wide one.
You know, one of the common sentences that I heard in the last 24 hours here outside, and this is an open question which we'll end with, and I'll be happy to hear your comments as well, is that cybersecurity is over the hill. Like, it's going down, there's, you know, an understanding that there won't be a holistic solution. Everybody will try to minimize because the resources already invested in that have been going too far. Where is this market going, do you think?
I think, you know, when someone tells you, I'm giving you a 100% solution, go away, okay? Because actually there is no, you know, it's not, there is no such a solution. But I think we do need to find those solutions that will give you or the highest option or the highest solution for the problem. We do need to still invest a lot in security, because we all know that, you know, this is, I don't remember her name, but the Cyprus ministry. Yeah, she talked here. Yeah. She talks about the user being the weakest link in our organization, that we will continue to do mistakes, and we need to maybe move the responsibility not from the user to the IT of the organization, to the security guys in the organization, to minimize the mistake and to minimize the breaches.
Mr. Rosenberg, your thoughts?
Yeah, so 2 comments on that. First, I think when people say that, they usually refer to the security measures of core enterprise networks. And there are many, many vendors, but there are other areas of cybersecurity as well. If it's different areas of IoT, if it's autonomous transportation, if it's smart agriculture, whatever. Cybersecurity is part of every technology, and some areas of technology which are newer don't have that many solutions yet or at all. And the second comment is again, it's about innovation. If we were all sitting here still with our Nokia 3312 from 15 years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with so many problems, but we want to push forward all the time. We want to have autonomous trains running 400 kilometers an hour, and we want to have cryptocurrencies, and we want to have. So we're pushing the technology forward. Cybersecurity is just a byproduct of that. So anyone saying something like that about cyber, I feel doesn't really understand what it means. And as long as the world keeps pushing, the economy keeps pushing for new technologies, we're not going to see cybersecurity going anywhere.
Have we seen the peak, Mr. Lowe?
Well, you know, speaking for my country, Singapore, which is, by the way, smaller than the size of Tel Aviv Metro, we thought we did enough for security until we got hacked, right? I think it was mentioned in one of the opening speeches at this conference. We got hacked, and we realized that what we did was not enough. And that's despite the fact that we've spent so much time and so much resources into this. And I know, having been in the industry, when I first joined this industry a long time ago, I thought I was going to be here for just a short while, you know, like the dot-coms, you know, they came and gone. But the situation is not improving, right? It's getting from bad to worse. It's an evergreen industry. One of the speakers was saying it's an evergreen industry. good for us, right? I mean, all of us in cyber, it's good for us. But I don't see it going away. I don't think it's a sunset industry. I think there's still a lot of opportunities. And I think we are tracking some of the new trends that are coming up in the horizon. For example, 5G. When you look at 5G, where you're going to get ubiquitous computing, it's scary. Anything and everything is going to be connected to anything and everything, right? Can you imagine what are the possibilities for the hackers? It's going to be infinite, right? There are things like edge computing, where computing is no longer centralized, it's going to be pushed to the edge. And a lot of stuff is being done at the edge, right? And the other thing is IoT, right? It's going to be big, right? And you've got the next big one, which is going to be a huge game changer, which is quantum computing. It's going to change everything. It's going to crack every single encryption protocol that you know today. So I don't see this going away. I think we're still in an ongoing battle, and I think we need to be smart. Every CISO, every government, every corporation needs to have a clear strategy. And I'd like to go back to my earlier point that don't try to do everything yourself, right? You can do some things yourself, but you got to work with the experts. You got to partner. You got to outsource whenever it makes sense, right? Especially in the innovative areas where things are still evolving. It's good to actually partner with people who are subject matter experts in that area. So long story short, it's not going away.
And so understanding that creating an attack, generating an attack is always going to be cheaper than designing a defense, and the smart attacker will always be one step ahead of the defenders. Where is this going?
I think what we're seeing is an evolution of the space. So outside of my role at Walmart, I work with a lot of venture capitalists and private equity firms. I look at the innovation side of the world closely on a daily basis. And a few years ago, we entered a cybersecurity vendor bubble. It was like the dot-com bubble. The only difference is it didn't crash, it just deflated. We're seeing less companies getting funded, we're seeing less companies enter the market, but the total dollars being invested is higher. We're just seeing late-stage growth round, we're seeing bigger early rounds, but we're seeing that number, that playing field start to shrink. Now, if you ever see the cybersecurity vendor slide from Momentum, a VC firm, I mean, they're tracking somewhere over 400 companies. That still feels like a lot. But what we're seeing is an evolution that enterprises and companies really of all sizes are realizing security is a thing that we have to do. But they're starting to take a different approach. They're going back and saying, instead of trying to buy a product to solve everything, why don't I start to do things the right way? Why don't I just maintain my systems? Why don't I think about authentication and access? Why don't I leverage vendors, right, where I can, versus buying all the product that's available? I think the other thing that we're seeing that's changing this space and shows that it's not going anywhere, it's just evolving, is in the last few years has been the first time we've ever seen the fabric of what I call the fabric effect. It's the vendors who run the technology fabric of our life starting to take responsibility for security. So if you think iOS, so Apple's iOS, they don't like third-party security products. They want to own it end-to-end, and they want to make you secure. Windows, Microsoft was the hated child of the 2000s when it came to security. Hands down, one of the best security vendors in the world now, and they're not a security vendor. But they're investing and saying, well, we own the OS, we own the cloud computing platform, we're going to give you the services, and we're going to build it into the fabric. We're starting to see that accountability and that ownership more. So security's not going away, just where it's being invested in, how it's being invested in, and how we as enterprises are consuming it is fundamentally changing. But as long as the attacks are out there, and the attacks can affect our customers, can affect stock price, can affect revenue, and in some cases can affect life, we're never going to see this slow down.
And on that optimistic note, for all these people here, I want to thank you all. I want you all to join me in thanking Mr. Adam Ely of Walmart, Dr. Shimrit Sur David of Secret Double Octopus. Who thought about that name? Mr. Ken Lo of Singapore, and Colonel Zohar Rosenberg from Elon. Thank you very much. And we are still on that subject, and to continue the conversation on that, I would like to invite Mr. Gil Shveid, founder and chief executive officer of Checkpoint Israel. Mr. Shveid. Yes, you can go. So, So you, Boker Tov. Good morning. We heard the discussion. Being one of the super, mega, ultra large stop for cyber solutions, is there existence for those small companies, or the world eventually is going to look for checkpoints to solve their problems?
I think first there's definitely existence for young companies who come up with innovative technologies. There's also no doubt in my mind that what we will see in our industry is a consolidation. I think Mr. Eli mentioned that there is one of the bankers is tracking 400 security companies. That's, by the way, less than 1/3 of cybersecurity companies out there. Now, as a buyer, you cannot evaluate 400 or 1,200 technologies. You cannot build your security solution out of 50 different vendors, even if you select them. So I think, yes, there is a reason for innovation, and yes, startups are important, but our industry right now is in the direction of consolidation.
So do you see customers of you that are approached by a small company saying, we found vulnerability? Do they even open the door for them, or they just come to you and say, someone told me that there's vulnerability?
I think it depends on the companies. I think the big companies are open and looking for innovative technologies, and that's good. On the same time, the big companies realize that they can't work with 50 vendors, and not, by the way, it's not even there are many reasons for that. The main reason that it doesn't achieve the highest level of security. There's many entry vectors into the organization, and our challenge is to block all of them. And usually when you find one technology that focuses on one vector, you like solve one small problem, but the rest remains open. And I think the challenge is to take all these innovative technologies and plug them into all the holes and make a much more holistic architecture and much more holistic approach to security.
You often speak about fifth generation of cybersecurity. Yep. What is the fifth generation?
So I think our industry has evolved. It started almost 30 years ago with the first computer viruses. What we know today as the industry of cybersecurity actually evolved out of the second generation, which is the internet and the network attacks. And then we went to the third generation when hackers started to exploit vulnerabilities in applications. And came the fourth generation when the malware is becoming more and more sophisticated and polymorphic. And now we are in the fifth generation of cybersecurity, when attacks are both, first, it uses all the attributes of the previous generation. So we still need to protect against all the old ones. Second, the attacks today are multi-vector. You can download an app to your iPhone. That app will hack your cloud account. From that cloud account, it will get to the enterprise. You can get a CV, a resume from somebody, forward it to somebody else. Now the malware will start to show itself, and from that point will download the real payload that causes the damage and will start spying or creating a damage. And these are multi-vector attacks that are much more sophisticated. They can be large scale. And I think the technology that we are dealing today with Gen 5 is not technology by amateurs anymore, it's technology by professionals. A lot of these technologies are coming from state-sponsored organizations. I'm not saying that the state-sponsored are the ones that are attacking necessarily, but the technology and the vulnerabilities that they discovered eventually get discovered, and eventually find themselves to the sort of open market of cyber hackers. And these hackers use this technology to attack all of us.
So when we look at a world where campaigns of influence are taking place, and it's no longer about protecting your information or even your physical infrastructure, it's about protecting your mind from other influence, from people who will try to manipulate you and have more and more effective tools in doing that.
I think there are many, many different subsegments. One subsegment is protecting the public opinion. And that, by the way, was true, protecting ourselves from people who give us false idea of truth, and now we call it sometimes fake news and so on. That's always been a situation in human history. It's still an issue, and technology makes it bigger because we are exposed to more information sources, and people can access to us not by talking to us in the street, but eventually it was talking to us, then it became mass media like TV, and now it's the multimedia that we see every day on our phone, on our
Multimedia,
computer.
but a personal message designed specifically for you and what
Sure.
this
No, I think
organization knows
what
about.
the problem we're trying to solve is not that, even though I think we can help in that too. Problem we're trying to solve is the ability to get into your infrastructure, to your data, to everything that we have basically, and we are connected now 100% of the time on multiple fronts. I'm sure that on this stage, and we're not in a computing environment, there is multiple computing platforms that can be hacked, from the projector to the phone I'm using, to the audio system, and probably 10 other systems in these rooms. And we need to protect ourselves for our data, for our privacy, and for, by the way, the operation. Someone can shut the lights here and can shut the electricity on this room or on the entire city.
And so you work with what, about 100,000?
About 100,000 customers.
So what's your advice to the CIOs or the CISOs of those companies? How do you start to design that? How do you know how far to go? How do you allocate the resources to that? What is exaggerated? What is required?
So there's several points. One is I think people need to think much more about strategy and architecture and not just about vendor. The whole discussion about multi-vendor, there's more than one vendor today in every environment. The question if you can have 50, not if you can have one. Then the question is, again, is not how many technologies and products you own. The question is what do you do with them and how do you operate them and what's the effective way. So it's about thinking about the strategy and architecture. Today, and I will say this is a fact and this is something that we should all worry about, most organizations are dealing with protecting against Gen 2 and Gen 3 cyber attack. And the attackers are in Gen 5. So there's really no wonder when we see a multi-attack, a mega attack, or a data leakage, we all ask ourselves, how can that happen? This organization invests in cyber. Most organizations are not there. They're in the second or third generation, and we need to move to the 5th generation of cybersecurity. There's many aspects to that beyond thinking about architecture. It's what technologies we use. It's doing prevention. Most of our industry thinks in the sense of detection. And by the way, some of us borrow it from the traditional warfare. We take intelligence, now we have intelligence about something bad that might happen or something bad that already happened, and we send our police forces and we send our armies and they will deal with that situation. Doesn't work in cyberspace. First, we have very little intelligence, but even more critically, even if we have intelligence, we move at the speed of humans, and the malware moves at the speed of computers, and there is no comparison. If you have the largest organization in the world with hundreds of cyber experts, the malware proliferates to tens of thousands of computers in a matter of seconds, so you cannot chase them. You need automated tools, and the most important element is to prevent them from starting, because in 10 seconds, the malware can cause a huge amount of damage. If it's on the cloud, all your data can go away in a matter of minutes. So first, the key is prevention, not detection. And many people in our industry don't believe that that's possible. I do believe that it is possible. I think consolidation will also occur. And I think that we need to step up to the most advanced technologies dealing with polymorphic malware, dealing with plugging all the holes and unified architectures, and running faster than the hackers.
So if prevention is possible, when a customer comes to you, what do you tell them? You tell them, look no further, I'm going to provide you the best available protection you can have, or you tell them, okay, I'm going to do that much, but you will have to look for more?
I think it depends who you are. It's, if I would design today a security architecture for a company or a country or whatever, I think I can do it holistically, and I think I can provide a pretty good solution by Check Point, and not a pretty good solution, the best solution, the easiest solution, the most effective one, and so on. But that's not the situation in our world. The situation that we go into an environment that have tons of different systems, both IT systems and security systems. So the question for us is how do we transform that organization and not how do we design it from scratch. Transformation is usually more difficult than starting things from scratch, and we do have a platform that can transform things from previous generation to the 5th generation.
And one last word about our location, Israel, which became a hub for cybersecurity. Also, thanks to you have a stake in that, personally. Is it still a leading hub? Will it stay like that?
I think first Israel is a leading hub for all technology, even though there is still a lot of innovation outside Israel. We usually think about ourselves as the center of the world. We are not, but I think we are important. In cybersecurity, there is a very high level of concentration of technology, knowledge, people that are experts, and some of the leading companies in cyber are in Israel. I'm proud to say that Check Point is one of them. I think we are leader in our space for 24 years now. We exist for 25, and I think we've been able to keep that leadership for a long time, much longer than most technology companies. And I think that's good. I think there's more and more ecosystem for cyber that's in Israel now than any part of the world right now.
But maybe because of the success of many Israeli startups, we have designed a system, governmental one, and a social atmosphere that promotes startups,
Sure.
but doesn't really promote industries, doesn't really promote the next checkpoint. But those small startups with the desire to make an exit, to be sold to someone and move on. And sometimes you don't see any of our agencies cultivating a more stable industry that would last for more years.
I think the key to the industry that we are, the technology industry, is the free markets and the open markets. So I think we have a terrific government in the sense of promoting the economy and promoting technology. And again, not for 1 year. It's something that our governments are doing for over 30 years and are doing it effectively. But the key is not the government. When I meet with a lot of government officials that try to help and support, and they ask you what we can do from you, and I usually start the conversation is nothing. Give us freedom and let us run, because that's the nature of startups. We have today plenty of funding in Israel. We have a lot of money. I don't think money is the issue. I think talent is the issue. The government can always do more in providing more education. That's the key to success of any society, and definitely our industry. But the government is doing a lot of it. So I think the key is to keep the open markets, not to try to drive it and to steer it. And I do believe that the open market forces will take care of it. Yes, we need more bigger companies, but we cannot have 1,000 big companies. We need to have, by the way, look at the software business by itself in the world. Check Point, we are selling for about $2 billion, roughly a little bit less than that a year. Our market cap is roughly $18 billion. We are probably among the top 10 to 20 software companies in the world. And that's an industry that exists, let's say, for 50 years. So we can't expect to have 10 companies like that in Israel if there's only 20 in the entire world. And we are not giant. In standards of large companies in the world, we are a small, mid-sized company. We're 5,000 employees. As I mentioned, $2 billion of revenues, and still we have a big impact on the world. So technology is not the game of the giants. Technology is the game, in many cases, of the right technology, the right people, and sometimes the right size too.
Mr. Gil Shved, founder and CEO of Check Point, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
this
very much.
conversation.